Okay, so it looks like we are live. We are back with another guest, and this is a very special guest. And I brought Keith on because I've been hearing a lot of concerns and changes out there with everything that's going on. A lot of nurses are facing having to make um, decisions, really, really tough career decisions that are in support of them and their family and their best interest. And sometimes nurses who have to make these tough decisions are not being well supported. Sometimes are being told, "Oh, well, this is what you signed up for," or blah blah blah. But I wanted to bring on an expert, someone who's expert in supporting nurses and someone who has been doing this for a long time. Through while these, we've never been through a global pandemic, but we have been through tough times like recessions and such. And I wanted to interview someone who has been around, for more than like 5 years um, in the scene. So, Keith, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Amelia. And I was just going to introduce myself quickly. My
Okay.
name is Keith Carlson. Many of you may have heard of me or know me as Nurse Keith. I am a holistic career coach for nurses, work with nurses all over the country, some out of the country, but the preponderance are here. And I'm also a nurse podcaster, freelance writer, consultant, blogger, and that's sort of that's the zeitgeist of what I do. And everything I do revolves around nursing and nurses and supporting the profession and the industry.
Hmm. So, and how long have you been supporting nurses as a career coach?
Let's see, it's been about 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
It was a slow burn at first because I was
Mhm.
still working. And I've only been fully self employed for 3.5 years as of now.
Mhm.
But I've been doing the coaching for not quite a decade, but I'm getting there, close to a
Okay.
decade.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So, so yeah, so I saw a nurse, well, several nurses who, um, they have like autoimmune challenges themselves. They
Hmm.
have weakened immune systems, and they also are taking care of families. They have family members at home who are in the vulnerable population, and some of them I've seen get job assignments that are put them in a high risk situation for themselves, for taking stuff back to their families, and they've had to make decisions about leaving, their job. And I felt as though sometimes, um, so it's interesting. This person had posted in a couple different groups, and they got two very different responses. One group was like, "Oh, great job for standing up for yourself," and others were like, "Well, this is what you signed up for." So, what would you say to a nurse who's like finds herself in that position? I mean, not that they will make career choices based on something Keith said that they
Hmm.
saw on a Facebook Live, but
Hmm.
what would be some of the things that, because I know you coach nurses, what would be some of the things that you would invite someone to consider, or say they actually, yeah, two questions. So, what would you say to somebody who's considering how they would deal with being in that situation? And two, what would you say to somebody who made that choice, that tough choice? It's like, you know what, this is unsafe for me. I have to leave.
Got it. Okay, Amelia. Could I first contextualize this and then
Sure,
go to the two questions?
sure.
Okay. So first, I want to contextualize, like you said, Amelia, a little bit ago, that like we've never experienced anything like this before. HIV in the early 80s and into the 90s was a taste of this. And we've had Ebola, SARS, MERS, H1N1. We've had dress rehearsals for this, but we've never had something like this. And some virologists and epidemiologists are saying that COVID-19 is actually a dress rehearsal for the big one that we've been expecting
Mm,
for 30 years. So this may not be the big one. And so
mm,
we're all in a situation, all of us, every single person on the planet, where we're facing a situation that we've never really seen before. And only people who were alive, let's say during the firebombing of London, during World War II, or the few people who were alive during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, really have a memory of something this globally disruptive, right?
mhm,
So we're or people who lived through the Holocaust, perhaps too. So, you know, we've I've been talking a lot about how we're all in a grieving process, all of us. as individuals, as communities, as states, as countries, as continents, and as the planet and humankind as a whole. So running through that grieving process, we've got a lot going on, right? We've got depression, we've got fear, bargaining, denial, acceptance, and we cycle through those all the time. I experience pretty much all of those at least once a day, if not twice a day, because the
Mm,
grieving process is not linear, right? It's a
true. Yeah.
cycle, and you can get caught up in different parts of it. So let's take a nurse who, let's say, works in a step down unit, or maybe an ICU or an ER. Doesn't really matter the unit, actually, because COVID-19 is impacting any unit that happens to be open in acute care. Some units are being kind of turned into mini ICUs just on the spot, like chemo rooms are being turned into mini ICUs in some
Mm,
facilities.
mm,
So we're facing various things. One, we're facing an existential threat against us personally and our families and the people we love and care about. Then we're facing an existential threat against ourselves economically and all the other aspects of how this disease, this pandemic is impacting us, right? On
mm,
every level of life you can possibly identify. And then the nurses who reach out to me, and this happens not quite daily, but almost daily, are in this ethical and moral dilemma. So I'm talking as the nurse, right? This generic nurse who's in this dilemma.
mm,
I, female or male nurse, love what I do, and I feel ethically and morally bound to treat people. And however, maybe let's say I'm 9 months post chemo for breast cancer or prostate cancer. And I have a husband at home who's in 3 high risk groups. Maybe I have a child with rheumatoid arthritis or
mm,
chronic bronchitis or asthma, or maybe the child has lupus, for instance. So, and then I have elderly parents I'm caring for who live in a little in-law apartment behind the house. So I have all these responsibilities for my family. I'm post chemo, maybe less than a year. My immune system is somewhat compromised, and I've
mhm,
worked really hard to get where I am, right? And my husband and my in-laws and my parents and my children need me, and they need me to be around, right? But I feel ethically and morally bound to stay in my job, and I don't want to abandon my colleagues. And I'm hearing from nurses who say work in a community health center somewhere, who used to work ER or ICU, and they feel survivor's guilt because they're not in the muck and mire of the COVID fight in the ICU and
mm,
ER. And I say, look, we all have our own capacity for what we're willing and able to do, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise. And we have to make the choices that are best for us. And we can't, what's the right word? We can't sacrifice or martyr ourselves
mm,
on the premise that we need to serve no matter what. And I've written and spoken about nurse martyr syndrome in the past. So every decision we make today in the midst of this pandemic is a moral and ethical decision that has multiple deep layers that we can keep unwinding and unwinding and unwinding, and we're never going to find a perfect answer. So to this nurse, I say, you need to do what's best for you and your family. And I know if you leave your job, you're going to feel guilty, you might feel shame, and your bank account's going to take a hit. But if you get sick and or die working treating COVID, and many nurses and doctors and others are dying, think about the impact of that. Think about throwing that stone in the pool, and think about the ripples through people's lives who love you, care about you, and or depend on you.
mhm.
So did I answer both of those
Yeah,
questions
no,
more?
yeah, you did, you did.
Okay.
Um,
That was a long diatribe.
it,
I'm
it
sorry.
was no, it was perfect. It was great.
Okay.
What would you say? And also, nursing has, unfortunately, a reputation for having bullies.
Oh,
So,
yes.
what would you say, to the nurse, who made a decision to leave,
Hmm.
like an unsafe job or unsafe
Sure.
work assignment, and people said this is what you've signed up for. I mean, I personally feel as though, we as a nurse, like I didn't sign up to be in a war zone. I'm a
No.
civilian nurse, so there's that. But what would you say to a nurse who might be facing bullying, or maybe she said, you know what, I don't know if I can go into another shift. Just like the last shift, I already took a chance, and I don't know if I can do it. And say her nurse colleague says, like, you know what, this is what you signed up for. Like,
Right.
what sort of like wording or conversation or verbiage would you like to empower nurses with to respond back
Thank
to
you.
that? Yeah.
Good question. First of all, I want to say, and this might sound a little stark and a little like not gallows humor, but just like a gallows type of statement. If you die, do you want on your tombstone, sorry, kids, I didn't listen to my heart. I followed what my colleague was
Mm-hmm.
saying, or something like that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I listened to the nurse bully instead of my husband. Do you really want that on your tombstone, metaphorically speaking?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there's an ethical and moral obligation, and you have an ethical and moral obligation to stay alive if that's what you're choosing to do, and which I hope you are. And you have an obligation and a deep heart centered desire to be there for your family and to not harm yourself or harm others who you love. So, in the end, in the final analysis, if someone at work or someone on some online forum says, this is what you signed up for, does it really matter what that person thinks?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really care? I know it might hurt. It might hit you. It might cut you to the quick, using a very old fashioned term, that, oh my gosh, this person's right. I'm abandoning my colleagues. I'm jumping out of the foxhole and running away from the front lines. And what I'll say is that we all have a different capacity for action at any given time, especially under dire, unforeseen, stressful, difficult, challenging circumstances. And like I said a bit ago, we've never seen anything like this in our lifetimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we need to make the best choices for us. And yes, there will be repercussions. However, we all have our own capacity. I do sometimes feel survivor's guilt for working from my living room and my kitchen and my office, but I have chronic pain. I have my own issues, and I can best serve by basically fighting the information wars online, making sure people get the best evidence based, solid, non hype information possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I coach nurses and help them through decisions like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I use my podcast as a platform, as my bully pulpit, for not bully as in
Yeah,
like
I know.
bullying, but the Teddy Roosevelt type of bully pulpit, to just stand on my soapbox basically and get the word out based on what I think. So we all have our own capacity. So if you leave the ERICU and you work at home or don't work, you can find a way to contribute. And if you fill the med box of the little old lady across the street and take her trash cans in and out and take care of your children and family, maybe that's your capacity right now. And is
Mm-hmm.
that such a bad thing?
Mm-hmm. 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 And I know you help, and you help nurses with this and help figuring this out and help them navigate this.
Yeah.
Um, People who, for whatever reason, are ready to move on to the next chapter of their career and finding other ways to help people and whatnot. I want to talk more about this because I feel as though, yes, the front lines are, and side note, full transparency, I'm not on the front lines. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
case management. So, yeah, so there is that.
Got it.
And this is definitely more so, I wanted to bring in a resource of someone else's, like another way to think of things because,
Mm-hmm.
of that, not an expert. So I just thank you for sharing that too.
My
Um,
pleasure.
so like, as far as like where we are now with, and looking at, the people who are like suffering the worst outcomes of what's going on of COVID, they tend to have like underlying things going on, right? There tend to be underlying things going on.
You mean
I mean,
comorbidities, you
yeah,
mean?
comorbidities.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm also seeing stories of people who were quote previously healthy and all of a sudden they're in
That's
ICU.
true. That's true.
Um, but I'm also hearing lots of stories about people who have, other comorbidities. So, what do you think about the conversation or the I don't know if there's two conversations, but I feel like there's like a lot of conversation about nurses on the front lines, taking care of people who've already succumbed or are on vents and ICU.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I'm hearing a lot about what nurses can do to help minimize the comorbidities or help alleviate some things that could, or help make people better fit or stronger to fight whatever comes their way. Like,
Now,
why? Go ahead.
are you asking how to make themselves stronger or make their patients stronger or
Make
their
make
loved
patience
ones? Their
because yeah,
patients.
because I feel
Okay.
like there's lots of talk about nurses, being on the front lines and
Right.
running all these, and it's like I feel like there is a workforce that could be out there that's providing great education about how to minimize, different comorbidities that could, leave you more vulnerable to picking up whatever.
I
Um,
see.
like more, I guess I wish there was like more talk about, I mean, maybe this isn't sexy, but I wish there was like
Yeah.
more talk about prevention and building up your immune system and washing your hands and covering.
Got it.
I wish there was like more talk about how nurses are out there helping with that versus the ICU story.
Sure. That now I know where you're going. I mean, there is talk about that, and at the same time, we're in such crisis mode. And I don't know, I may offend some of your listeners, but from my point of view, the federal response here in the United States has fallen way short, in my opinion. And we are behind the eight ball. And I'm going to do an episode today. I'm going to record about testing and what I've learned about testing and how we've bungled it here and continue to. So we're in crisis mode and we're dealing with trying to save people's lives. And the data shows that up to 30 to 40%, don't quote me on it, but somewhere in that vicinity of negative COVID-19 tests in the United States are false negatives. So false positives aren't really much of a problem. That means the person, even if they're asymptomatic, has to quarantine for 14 days, right? So it's inconvenient, but a false positive is inconvenient, but not that big a deal. 30% of negatives being false negatives, that's a big problem.
Wow.
So we have a problem in this country, and I think most of your viewers and listeners are probably aware, if they're healthcare providers or just savvy citizens, lay
Mhm.
people, that we have a problem with prevention here. We haven't put enough focus on prevention in the US in general. We're
True.
one of the most obese countries in the world, developed industrialized countries, and our rates of cancer, infant mortality, maternal infant issues around birth, cardiovascular disease, cancer, you name it, we've got it. And we don't have it dialed in like a lot of other industrialized developed countries do. So, we could get into a whole conversation about socialized medicine or Medicare for all, et cetera, but that's beside the point.
Mhm.
And that's another conversation. Yes, we need to talk about how people can strengthen their immune systems. And I think no matter how this whole COVID-19 issue eventually kind of unravels and then we kind of get a grip on it, COVID-19, they're saying, may likely become a seasonal disease. As it
Mhm.
mutates, it may just kind of cycle around every winter like the flu. And the next big one is probably going to come. So we need to learn, one, how to rebuild and maintain our public health system, which has been dismantled to a large extent the last few decades. And it's not sexy. ICU and ER is sexy, right? And
Mhm.
regular citizens and even healthcare providers, many don't think about public health because it happens in the background. And we only want public health when, things are going south.
Mhm.
And then we're like, oh my gosh, where's our public health system? So,
Mhm.
one, we need a really robust public health system, and we need nurses and others to be able to have jobs that allow them to work in the public health sector and really educate people. I mean,
Mhm.
deep national education
Mhm.
and really get out there. And I think that is one of my ideas and secrets about how we want to look at the long game, like the really long game. Because right now we're kind of in a sprint, but we also have to look at the marathon. And the marathon is how to keep, let's say, Americans, let's focus on the United States, how to keep Americans healthy in the big, big picture. So you're right about prevention. You're totally right about immune support. There's not, I mean, they're scrambling just to keep people alive right now. And we need to also have what you just mentioned, the bigger conversation about health in this country so that we're not so compromised collectively
Hmm.
when something big like this happens. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, no,
Do you
I
resonate with
completely
that?
agree. Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I just love to other people to share their points, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, someone else, you know, thank you for that.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. Of course.
and as you were talking about something, so we both have, various backgrounds, and I was raised by very entrepreneurial people. Um,
Mm.
Business is in my blood, and I feel as though marketing is like the solution to like all problems. Great marketing,
I
getting the
hear you.
word out about blah blah blah. So
Absolutely.
so what do you say? And so in light of, conversations that aren't necessarily getting out there the way that they should, and messaging about public health that's not getting out the way that it should,
Mhm.
um, what would you say to the nurse who is, perhaps seeing, these things, right? Seeing things that are going on, wishing that there could be like these improvements, or why don't we just do XYZ?
Mhm.
Um, and with my philosophy that, great marketing is a solution to all problems,
Mhm.
what would you say to that nurse, like right about now? Is it the time for, is there just like too much noise out there? Are we, as everyone at panic stations and running around, wringing their hands? Is there a space for a nurse who's seeing concerns or themes that aren't being addressed that could improve public health? Now is now the time for them to speak up, or should they wait until things quiet down? What would you say to that nurse?
Okay. And do you mean speaking up as a citizen or maybe as a nurse entrepreneur having a business that educates people or both?
Well, actually, as a person who reads as evidence-based articles,
Hmm.
as a person who chooses to read, yeah, evidence-based articles, who believes in science, who who knows about hand washing,
Hmm.
who believes in that, who wants to further that mission. I mean, but yes, of course, nurses, are experts in public health.
They are.
Um, but some nurses may not consider themselves as a nurse entrepreneur, and who am I?
Hmm.
To blah blah blah. So what would you say? All right. So what would you say to that nurse? Let's call her a nurse or
Okay.
him.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So many nurses, myself included, feel, and I felt this as soon as I graduated from my ADN program in 1996. I thought, I now am a licensed nursing professional, a healthcare professional. And I have a moral and ethical obligation and responsibility as a member of the society to represent nursing and healthcare in a positive way and to also contribute. Whether I'm contributing by chatting with somebody at Trader Joe's about COVID-19 and why they need to wash their hands, or I start a podcast, a blog, or I write a letter to the editor, or I meet with my local legislator to talk about local public health issues in my city or town or municipality. So that nurse has many, many choices. And I'll say that it is never too early and never a bad time to stand up on your soapbox and speak out. Now, you may speak out by, let's say, launching a podcast about public health or just expound on your feelings about the healthcare system in the United States. And you could reach literally thousands, tens of thousands, or maybe hundreds, thousands, or millions of people, depending on the circumstances. You have the option to start a blog and just start writing. That's what I did in 2005. That was one of the first nursing blogs on the internet. And that blog is now 15 years old and
Hmm.
has reached a lot of people. And I started it as a public service and just like I started it on a lark, actually, a challenge from my brother to start a blog. No one even knew what they were in 2005. I just flew by the seat of my pants and it became a thing. It became a thing. And then it led me to be paid to write and then paid to speak and then podcast and coach and do all the things I do. It all started with a blog I started with my brother on a snowy winter night in Massachusetts when he said, "Hey, Keith, you're a good writer. So why don't you start a blog?" So, you know, we can do anything. If you're a nurse who basically you don't want to be too public, so maybe you want to be public enough to write letters to the editor, or maybe you want to be public enough to request a meeting with your mayor and go, "Hey, mayor, I have some ideas about how we can improve public health in this city. Look at all these homeless people on every street corner. I've got some ideas." Or maybe you meet, like here in New Mexico, you can meet with your state legislators for coffee. It's really easy to make an appointment and sit down with them. And it's actually fairly accessible to meet with our members of Congress or senators here in the United States, our federal representatives. So you could learn to be an advocate and just do it on your own. I do it on my own, and I also do it as a member of the New Mexico Nurses Association. We have a really good lobbyist. We educate nurses and nursing students on how to be advocates and lobbyists and how to lobby for what it is we believe in. We go to committee meetings during legislative session. We meet with the governor and we meet with legislators, and some of us go to Washington, to the Capitol. And so everybody, like I said earlier, everybody has their capacity. Everybody has their thing. And if your thing, like I said, is helping a little old lady across the street and educating her, that's cool. That's great. Do that. And that's your thing. And that you're having an impact on one person, maybe
Mhm.
changing their life, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you want to have an outsized impact and have a podcast or a blog that meets lots of people. So we all can make a decision how we want to use the power and the trust that people have in us as nurses. And
Mhm.
I have no judgment about the person who wants to stay home and take care of his or her family. That's awesome. Do that. And I have no judgment about the person who wants to like become a member of Congress. We only have 2 nurses who are members of Congress right now. So if you want to like become a state legislator and then become a member of Congress, go for it. Like I'm
Mhm.
waiting for the first nurse president, and I think it'll happen someday. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, so again, it's never too early
Mhm.
and never too late to start speaking out in whatever capacity you feel you can manage and feel okay about.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you for that. And like, while I myself choose to, and that's also like where you choose to put your energy. Like for I myself, my energy is like there are other solutions. I know that I'd rather spend my time and energy in versus taking on the political system as we know it.
Right. That's not
And
for everyone.
no, it's not for everyone
It's not
for
for the
lots of
faint of heart.
lots of different reasons. It's not for
Yes.
everyone.
No.
Um, and as far as where we are now, that's just something I want people to consider is like, where do you want to spend, your time and energy?
Mhm.
Yes, you could, we can all do a great many things, but, what do you have the capacity to do and what really makes sense? Like right now, and I love how you said, maybe it just makes sense to educate, your loved ones and, the people and that you meet with, well, not meet with, but the people that you see on a day to day about, the importance of hand washing
Right.
and or like the importance of how using walking around with
Mhm.
gloves doesn't make you super person. There
Mhm.
was a nurse who did a very amazing he did like an amazing Facebook rant on how walking around with gloves is like so not helpful and actually
Mhm.
spreading and it was like it got thousands of views and it was shared hundreds of times. So that could be that was great. um, but enjoyed what you said about just listing all the different ways to get the word out. You know, um, there are people who are in certain positions, and we respect the positions that they're in, and they have the ability to help make things better. And throwing a suggestion or two their way towards you mentioned things that you feel comfortable with doing. You also mentioned your involvement with your local your state nursing association.
Right.
Um, if you don't feel like being the face of whatever, submitting a letter to the editor for a journal article or an opinion piece um, or starting a podcast. I mean, there's just so many things that we can do to start to get the word out there about the solutions and things that are working and science,
Hmm.
versus, just waiting and, holding that in, because that's like literally helping nobody.
Hmm.
So thank you so much for sharing like all of those things. Um, so say somebody is like, okay, you know what, I think after listening to this, I think I need to start the process. I'm not ready to leave my job tomorrow, and I'm not advocating this at all. I'm grateful to work at a facility. While I'm not front lines, they have instituted universal masking. Some facilities are only requiring masks of people who work directly in patient care. My facility is beyond that, thank goodness. So also, I'm talking from that space. I mean, if I was in a space where they weren't doing that, I don't know if I would even have like the head capacity
Yes.
to so just to be fully transparent. And um so yeah, they're at a place where they believe in universal masking for everybody because they know what's going on with testing. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. So
Yes, it is.
thank goodness for that. But in any case, um and I got off on a tangent and I
It's
forgot what I was
fine.
talking about.
Hmm.
But
You were
but
asking about a nurse who
oh
is
yes,
deciding
yes,
something
yes,
she may or may
yes,
not want to
yes. So she's
do.
thinking about, processing. She doesn't want to just up and leave. She wants to have things in place. She wants to know about, other ways, to help people. We talked about public health. Of course, telehealth is, if anything, I mean, there are some positive things that are coming out of this. I mean, telehealth and telemedicine has been just talk for
Hmm.
lots of for years, for like 10 years. It's been over 10 years, lots
Good
of talk.
point.
But now it's amazing how quickly folks can figure out implementing telehealth in their practice and implement um, the need for triage centers so that people aren't bombarding to the emergency room because of blah blah blah, and having hospitals are coming up with hotlines that are being staffed by nurses, and
Hmm.
um, a lot of things are being moved through quickly. They're figuring out billing.
Innovation.
Yes,
Yep.
yes. So so there are lots of ways that nurses could use their expertise that's not necessarily frontline, because there are people who want to get the front line. There are people who are, I don't want to say adrenaline junkies, but there are people who are feeling called to be there, who would want to be there, but they can't because there's somebody who's taking up a spot who could be serving someplace else.
Hmm.
They could be doing so. Like, do you help people who are navigating those situations, or do you have someone that you refer them to, or is that like pretty much like what you do all day? Tell me
I
more.
I help people in many, many different types of situations. Some people come to me with more what I might say psycho emotional or psycho spiritual issues around their careers and their lives. And I know where to draw the line between coaching in counseling or psychotherapy. And I can take someone to that edge and then I'm like, you know what? We're veering towards psychotherapy and I really want to refer you if you're not already in counseling or therapy.
Mm,
So I
okay.
know where to take people and then I know where to stop
Mm,
because I know where my expertise ends. But in career coaching, what I do, holistic career coaching, I call it, it's also a form of life coaching because I don't just help people with resumes and cover letters and LinkedIn and interview skills, though I'm happy to do that, or networking skills. If I don't understand what a person truly wants, how they see themselves in their place in the world, they don't understand the context of their life and what they want out of it and what they want to give back and what they love and what lights their fire and what makes them happy and what they do for fun and the kind of life they really truly want to live with themselves and their family, then I can't truly help them on a deeper
mm,
level. So yes, some people come to me with existential crises, especially right now. And some people come to me because they just want to get a job. And then
mm,
I will help them with all the tools to get a job.
mhm,
And at the same time, like I said, if someone comes to me and says, I just want my resume updated, I always say, yes, I can do that. We can do that. But if you're not dialed into what you really want and what you truly would like to create for yourself, a killer resume is awesome, but it's only a piece of the puzzle.
mm,
So, what I recommend to people out there, and I hope I'm not veering off course here, is that you need to truly understand yourself. You know, Socrates, I think he may have been the first person to say know thyself, or the first philosopher to popularize that
Mm,
statement many, 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 many years ago.
mhm,
But I think self-knowledge is where it has to begin, because if we don't truly understand ourselves, how can we face a moral and ethical dilemma during a global crisis in a way that feels fair to ourselves, our families, and others?
mm,
So, self understanding, I think, is key to not just happiness, but actually being productive in the way you want to be productive. So,
mm,
if you truly understand yourself, you're an introvert, you're an extrovert, you're an ambivert, you're the kind of person who likes to work alone, you're the kind of person who likes to be part of a team, you're the kind of person who wants to be out in front of lots and lots of people, or you're the kind of person who that makes you feel absolutely sick to your stomach.
mhm,
Um, Understanding yourself is the key to being able to identify your capacity, your passions, and how you would like to serve.
mm.
And I hope I didn't
Awesome.
veer off course too much
No,
there.
no, that was it was absolutely perfect. It was
Okay.
absolutely perfect.
All right.
So just to recap, the intent, I wanted this live to talk about, well, one, this came up because I saw, a lot of nurses struggling with everything that's going on, making decisions, hard decisions, and
Right.
some of them making decisions for themselves, for their families at our best, but not necessarily being supported. And, we're in, times that, we don't have a lot of folks around us who said, oh, the last time this happened with the Spanish flu, this is
Mm,
what worked, and people, we don't have like that reference point, we don't have that institutional knowledge to
right.
draw on. So I
I do.
wanted to so I wanted to talk to bring in somebody who has a larger or different viewpoint, just because of the many nurses that you've talked to over the years and that are
Mhm.
talking to you, and the research and the work that you're finding. I just wanted you to come in and bring a perspective of just other ways to consider decisions that we're making. And also, I'm all about providing people with full solutions, so that, if after looking at it, if you said, what, I think I need support. Well, Keith also is somebody who can also help you with that too. So I
Mhm.
definitely wanted to bring someone in who could also be a resource to folks, to walk them through the path that they, might now are considering walking through. So, how can people keep in touch with you?
Mhm.
Do you have anything specific about, what's going on? I know you do actually. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have a series that you're doing. So, yeah, how
Yeah.
can people continue to keep in touch?
Okay, so nursekeith.com is the clearinghouse for everything. You'll find links to my podcast there. You'll find links to my blog. And soon I'll have a membership site, probably in
Mm,
June of 2020, towards the end of June, I hope. It was going to be Nurses Week, but COVID-19 has kind of, you know, has sort of taken over
mm.
a lot of the things that I was going to be doing. So it's been scuttled a
Yeah.
little bit, but there will be a
Okay.
membership site there eventually
Oh,
for
cool.
people to talk to each other and talk to me, and take part in some of what I do without paying for, full coaching.
Mm,
My podcast is a lot about careers. There are now over 270 episodes.
mm,
And recently, for obvious reasons, a lot of the episodes are about COVID-19.
mm,
And there's factual ones, which are my COVID-19 updates, and there are also ones that are more inspirational, like my friend Caroline Cardenas, a nurse from San Diego who's in a PhD program, and she studies the science of play and why
mm,
play is so important. And we talk about play and somatic experience and joy, cultivating joy as a way of helping us cope in these times. That
mm,
episode came out recently, and there's some others coming up soon on compassion and
mm,
empathy and
mm,
self-care. So I'm doing factual, but also very, very supportive and uplifting episodes. So you can pick
awesome.
and choose what's best. And then you can go back through the episodes looking for the ones about interviews and resumes and career
Mm,
choices and things like
mhm,
that.
mhm,
So I'm also on Facebook, Nurse Keith Coaching, Twitter, Nurse Keith, Instagram, Nurse Keith Coaching, and LinkedIn. So you can find me anywhere. NurseKeith.com is the best place to look. And
awesome.
anyone who wants to get in touch and just have a chat, a complimentary chat, can do so. So no problem.
Awesome.
Email me or leave a voicemail directly from nursekeith.com, and I'm happy to spend 30 minutes just talking about whatever's on your mind, basically.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna wrap up there. If anyone's interested in, learning more about the business of nursing or nurse marketing, um, you have the website, thebusinessofnursing.com. There you won't necessarily find a lot of stuff about COVID, which is one of the reasons I brought, you on to talk about that. And what you will find is like folks to help you with, I think, like the structural, the tactical stuff. I feel as though, Keith, you're a little bit more, I don't want to say touchy feely than I am, but
I
you'll find
understand.
like over on my website, you'll find the branding expert, the sales expert. You'll find that's who you'll find. But
I
if right
understand.
now, you feel as though you need more support, I was like, like who could I bring in? Because that's another area that's not my expertise. And so I was like, Keith, you would be the perfect person. So
Thank you, darling.
yeah. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. So I look forward to staying in touch, and thank you so much again for joining me.
My pleasure and privilege. Thanks, and much good health and safety to everyone and your loved ones.
Yes, same. And same to you as well. Take
Thank
care.
you.